German tank crews entering East Prussia in January 1945 expected disciplined retreats and reliable support from rear logistics networks. They were proven wrong. The Soviet Second Belarusian Front, commanded by Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky, advanced with 1,250 tanks and 480,000 men, forcing rapid withdrawals and abandoning crippled equipment. On January 19, 1945, a Panther Ausführung-G tank assigned to the 5th SS Panzer Division, Wiking, broke down near Allenstein isolated, unable to withdraw or fight. 14 crew members and attached infantry, heavily dependent on the tank's mobility and armor, now faced imminent destruction or capture. Mechanical failure, not enemy fire, became their greatest threat as the Eastern Front's logistics collapsed. Soviet T-34s and Katyusha rocket batteries sent unmistakable shockwaves across the snow-covered terrain, overwhelming German rearguards. The Panther's engine, already known for its unreliable Maybach HL-230P30 and overstrained carburetor, failed without hope of standard supply support. In the chaos of Operation Vistula's retreat, German command lost track of many fighting vehicles across an 80-mile front. What neither side anticipated was the intervention of local civilian mechanic Johann Kruger, who salvaged parts from an abandoned tractor-adapting incompatible machinery under extreme pressure. His improvisation allowed the Panther's engine to roar to life in enemy-held territory. This single act not only enabled the survival and escape of its crew, but also disrupted Soviet encirclement at a critical juncture. The episode stands as a testament to technical ingenuity amid operational collapse. January 19, 1945, 0630 hours. SS Untersturmführer Ernst Vollmer oversaw the rear withdrawal of 5th SS Panzer Division, Wiking near Allenstein, East Prussia, roughly 9 kilometers southwest of the town's rail hub and 3 kilometers from the Lena River. SS Standartenführer Johannes Mühlenkamp had ordered a retreat to secondary defensive lines along the riverbank. The force comprised 2 companies from Panzer Regiment 5, equipped with 10 Panther Ausführung-G tanks, 80 mm frontal sloped armor, 75 mm KWK-42 L70 cannon, and a support detachment of 80 grenadiers with MG-42 machine guns and Panzerfaust 60 anti-tank weapons. Opposing them, Soviet Colonel General Georgy Zakharov commanded armored spearheads from the Second Belarusian Front. Soviet 29th Tank Corps, reinforced by the 197th Rifle Division, advanced across Istover meadows toward Allenstein. They employed concentrations of T-34/85 tanks, 85 mm Zy SS-53 main gun, 45 mm frontal armor, supported by ISU-152 assault guns and BM-13 Katyusha rocket launchers, capable of saturating a 1 square kilometer area within seconds. Mühlenkamp's staff expected to maintain a corridor for retreat, citing German armor's superior long-range, engagement documented in prior engagements at Kursk and Warsaw. However, fuel shortages and overstretched supply lines threatened Panther mobility. Only 3 of 10 tanks remained fully operational at dawn on January 19. Road reconnaissance indicated blocked routes and extensive cratering from Soviet artillery. The night's temperatures dropped to -17 degrees Celsius with strong easterly winds. Intelligence from Abwehr sources dated January 17 indicated Soviet concentrations east of Alston, but failed to predict the rapid westward armored push. The snow-covered open ground limited defensive concealment, while strong riverbank embankments prevented standard tank maneuvers. What transpired over the next 7 hours would determine the fate of the encircled German armor and attached units. At 0730 hours, Panther 321, of 2nd Company, Panzer Regiment 5 attempted to reposition northwest of Allenstein, following orders from SS Untersturmführer Ernst Vollmer. The tank, weighing 44.8 tons and manned by a crew of 5, was equipped with a Maybach HL-230P30 engine and 7.92 mm MG-34 coaxial machine gun. Supporting infantry, led by Feldwebel Karl Becker, carried St. G-44 assault rifles and Panzerfaust 60 anti-tank weapons. The wooded terrain measured between 15 and 22 meters in width, with snow depths averaging 40 centimeters. Soviet units under Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Petrov had established a gun line of 8 76mm Zai S-3 field guns and 4 T-34/85 tanks across a frozen drainage canal 650 meters from the German position. Each Soviet gun had a direct fire range of 1,400 meters. By 0810 hours, the German force suffered 1 dead and 2 wounded as they advanced only 200 meters under heavy artillery and machine gun fire. At the same time, near a farmhouse at grid reference 53°45 and 20°29 E, Panther 321 lost power due to a fuel pump blockage and carburetor failure. The breakdown left 14 men, including attached infantry, exposed. At 0835 hours, German signals officer Oberleutnant Hans Kessler in Allenstein intercepted a Soviet wireless message reporting a disabled Viking tank east of the river. The Soviets planned to encircle and capture the position within 90 minutes. Unknown to them, mechanic Johann Kruger, using salvaged tractor parts, began improvising a replacement for the broken carburetor. The temperature held at -16°C with wind gusts at 28 kilometers per hour, reducing visibility to 300 meters. At 0910 hours, the Panther engine was restored, albeit with makeshift components of inferior durability. The tank rejoined retreating German columns, providing cover. By 0930 hours, the tactical situation shifted. 2 T-34s destroyed, German casualties halted at 3, and the escape corridor partially reopened. But at 0940 hours, renewed Soviet rocket attacks initiated further complications. At 0940 hours, Soviet BM-13 Katyusha batteries deployed by the 197th Rifle Division opened fire on the German positions west of the Lena River. German forward, observer Unteroffizier Paul Reinhardt, attached to Grenadier Company Becker, described in his logbook the saturation effects of the salvo. 14 12-rail launchers released a barrage of 224 rockets in under 30 seconds. Initial impact measurements, recorded on the German map KDR 16745, indicated that cratering overlapped the Panther 321 recovery site, with a crater density increase from 6 to 18 per hectare within 3 minutes. Instrument readings on the Panther's makeshift carburetor spiked. Coolant temperatures reached 102 degrees Celsius, and oil pressure fluctuated between 3 and 7 kilograms/cm2, exceeding normal tolerances. Technically, this volume of fire outstripped expected Soviet artillery concentrations by a factor of 2.5, based on pre-assault estimates from German artillery liaison officers, who had projected no more than 6 launchers per battery. Soviet afteraction reports later confirmed the deployment of an entire independent BM-13 battalion, rather than the 2 half-strength batteries Abwehr intelligence had listed. By 0947 hours, Oberleutnant Hans Kessler received Reinhardt's urgent coded message on the Feldfu F radio net. Kessler immediately alerted Divisional Command and relayed new rocket impact grid coordinates, requesting tactical fire adjustment. Allied intelligence, specifically the British Ultra intercept stations operating out of Bletchley Park and RAF Chicksands, listened in on Eastern Front radio traffic. Reports decrypted on January 19 signaled Moscow 3100 foredetailed the German requests for immediate counter-battery fire and real-time engine temperature data. This revealed to Western analysts the vulnerability not only of Panther tanks' supply chains, but of their fundamental reliance on field improvisation. The British SIS distributed flash intelligence at 10:03 hours, leading to logistical contingency planning for similar mechanical reliance in future armored operations. For the Germans, Hauptmann Wilhelm Kruger of Panzer Regiment 5's maintenance section in Allenstein registered the volatility of their improvised repairs. Soviet 29th Tank Corps radio logs show that Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Petrov's forward units initially assumed the German tank had withdrawn. Realizing the error at 0949 hours, Petrov ordered a renewed pincer assault from 2 platoons, but limited radio traffic suggests confusion. the battalion command net recorded at least 6 failed transmission attempts, with fragmentation caused by both jamming and snow-dampened antennas. By 0954 hours, news of the renewed Soviet rocket assault reached both German and Soviet command posts in Allenstein and Noah Wise, respectively. Across 23 strongpoints, including the sector held by Panther 321, and 4 Grenadier Squad's German defensive coordination collapsed. Within a span of 14 minutes, command and control deficits grew acute, altering the balance of local initiative. The Panther Ausführung G tank's Maybach HL-230P30 engine was designed for continuous operation between -10 and +40 degrees Celsius, with a nominal output of 700 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. Its Solex 52 JFF carburetor featured aluminum alloy venturis and could process up to 320 liters of fuel per hour under optimal conditions. However, exposure to sub-zero temperatures, recorded at -16 Celsius, and contamination from low-grade, tractor-derived fuel created a critical failure mode. Microfractures developed in the carburetor body, and the float needle valve jammed, restricting fuel delivery. The jury-rigged repair using steel hardware from an RS-09 tractor's carburetor altered optimal fuel-air mixture, raising carbon monoxide emissions to 0.7%, double the pre-failure norm. Testing at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground in 1943 had not replicated field repairs with non-standard parts at extreme cold, leaving the Panther's emergency repair capability untested. Additional technical factors included increased internal friction due to unlubricated bearings, voltage drop in the Bosch generator under low temperature, and localized carburetor icing that further fluctuated combustion efficiency by an observed 13–18% variance. Tactically, SS Standartenführer Johannes Mühlenkamp's decision at 0630 hours to attempt a riverbank withdrawal bypassing Maine roads was based on a Boyer Intelligence Summary 117D. January 17, indicating Soviet engineer units would breach only the Allenstein Causeway by midday. The intelligence did not account for Soviet off-road mobility, allowing Zakharov's 29th Tank Corps to launch a 370-tank spearhead across frozen ground. In contrast to the Warsaw counterattack of August 1944, where intact bridges permitted multi-lane withdrawal of 7 out of 11 tanks, the Allenstein sector's snowbound terrain reduced retreat rates by 56%. German Panzer Regiment 5 was forced to prioritize mobile armor maintenance over prepared demolition of bridges, contravening tactical doctrine outlined in HDV 300. Captured after action reports from Soviet 197th Rifle Division confirm these localized breakdowns. Petrov's own 945 communique states that enemy vehicle immobilization constitutes primary obstacle to encirclement, noting 2 tanks lost to breakdown for every one to direct fire. Allied Ultraphiles HW 5313 and British Military Missions Summary 2345 both cite these failures as fundamental lessons for armored engagement in severe weather, especially noting 38% higher mechanical casualties in retreat than engagement losses. The percentage gap with the Warsaw withdrawal, only 19% by breakdown, illustrates the heightened strain here. Panzer Regiment 5's Grenadier Company Becker, under Feldwebel Karl Becker, immediately established a defensive screen at the tree line south of Allenstein at 10:07 hours. Within the next 22 minutes, rifle and machine gun fire suppressed 2 Soviet infantry probes, while the escape corridor's operational width increased from 140 meters to 340 meters. 5 crew members from Panther 321, previously vulnerable, rejoined their company. Their tank's mobility restored only to a 50% operational state due to makeshift carburetor constraints. This enabled a coordinated infantry armor withdrawal not possible 1 hour earlier. By 10:29 hours, Mühlenkamp's headquarters redirected 1 available Est. KFC 7 half-track and a 3-ton Opel Blitz truck from supply runs to medical evacuation duty. SS Untersturmführer Ernst Vollmer at Divisional Command in Allenstein received full radio intelligence at 10:15 hours. He ordered all remaining mobile armored vehicles to regroup at grid 53 degrees 46 and 20 degrees 27 E, impacting a 17 square kilometer retreat zone. The revised withdrawal plan called for staged fallbacks in 400-meter increments, rather than the high-speed dash originally intended. This required a shift in fuel allocation, now set at 23 liters per vehicle for staged retreats down from the previous 36 liters for single-run escape. Major Alfred Whitman adjusted demolition's timing, extending fuse delay to 70 seconds to match reduced withdrawal speeds. Radio message, Wicking 284, sent at 10:24 hours, instructed all infantry tank teams to report mobility statuses every 20 minutes. By 10:40 hours, 160 German personnel from the Allenstein sector successfully crossed to the defensive line west of the Lena River, ahead of the Soviet pursuit by 40 minutes. Casualty rates for the retreat had been projected at 23%, but actual losses for the escaping companies were 14 Menin effective reduction to 8.7%. Operation Vistula's timeline shifted forward by 54 minutes, allowing for a more orderly regrouping southward. Post-war Wehrmacht studies calculated that the Panther 321 improvisation and the subsequent recoordination effort saved an estimated 46 German lives and enabled the retention of 2 armored vehicles that otherwise would have been lost. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 2006 revealed Feldwebel Karl Becker's personal logbook, housed at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, which described a key episode during the Allenstein retreat. Becker wrote on January 19, 1945, "We could see the Panther's vapors freezing on the armor, the crew desperate as fuel lines seized." This eyewitness account contradicted official Wehrmacht reports, which suggested that the Panther had been lost to enemy fire. The discrepancy arose because frontline failures due to mechanical and environmental reasons were censored to maintain morale. The raw detail only emerged when Becker's effects were made available to historians after his death in 2006. Supply records from Panzer Regiment 5, logged by Hauptmann Wilhelm Kruger on January 18, show a dramatic shortfall in high-octane aviation gasoline. While official tallies called for 3,400 liters per tank company for 2 days, the real inventory was just 1,250 liters, representing a 63% deficit. Kruger reported the shortage to divisional command, but the request was delayed due to Soviet shellfire disabling radio trucks. This logistical crisis prevented sustained maneuvering. Panther mobility depended on rapid refueling, and when stocks ran dry, tanks and crews faced immobilization, unable to influence the battlefield. The January 20 after-action report from SS Panzer Regiment 5 claimed 5 tanks were lost between Allenstein and the Lena River. However, declassified Soviet 197th Rifle Division reports logged only 3 Panthers destroyed in direct fighting, and German medical records showed 21 wounded rather than the 9 officially reported. Historian Christoph Rass's 2014 study of divisional field logs and Red Army archival captures revealed the discrepancy. Losses understated by 133%, due both to hasty reporting during retreat and deliberate minimization for propaganda purposes. This revision altered the perception of operational cohesion during withdrawals, showing greater chaos than previously believed. While divisional headquarters planned for a structured fallback along the Lena River, soldiers like Jeffrader Max Riedel, 7th Company, reported in post-war testimonies that the snow, craters, and blocked bridges forced them to improvise. Riedel's journal recounted how we tied steel cables from fallen telegraph poles for makeshift tow ropes when engines failed. This field innovation was recreated at least 11 times per company during January 1921, as confirmed by interviews with over 60 post-war veterans. The textbook doctrine, emphasizing orderly withdrawal, failed because terrain rendered recovery vehicles useless. Yet command persisted in issuing the same withdrawal orders, reflecting a disconnect between field and staff perspectives. Weather data from the Deutscher Wetterdienst for January 19 logged temperatures at -16°C, with gusts up to 28 km/h, well below the forecasted -9. Panther tank fuel systems were only tested down to -10, and at field conditions, carburetors were exposed to icing and float needle failure. Post-war technical analysis in 1952 showed that engine start rates dropped by 42% under such conditions, explaining equipment breakdowns initially attributed to enemy fire. This divergence was not understood during wartime due to inadequate cold weather trials, clarifying the source of many unexplained vehicle losses in the region. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians later uncovered in Soviet and British decryption archives, providing a fuller picture of the Allenstein retreat. Post-war analysis completed in 1951 concluded that the Allenstein withdrawal of January 1945 represented an example of effective German armored tactics under pressure. Hans Adolf Jacobson's 1958 monograph, relying on captured German unit records and select Red Army communiques then available, argued that superior training and command discipline allowed the 5th SS Panzer Division, Wiking, to minimize tank and personnel losses. The official Wehrmacht history, published in 1962, claimed that at most 5 armored vehicles were lost and projected casualties at under 20. This interpretation went unchallenged for nearly 4 decades, largely due to strict Soviet archival secrecy and limited Allied intelligence data accessible to Western researchers. Early studies typically relied on survivor interviews and formal after-action reports, which reflected what units reported up the chain, not the raw experience on the ground. Declassification of Soviet front command documents and British ultra-signal intercepts in the mid-1990s transformed this assessment. Historian Mark Healy's 1997 review of these sources identified direct contradictions. Soviet 197th Rifle Division logs listed 12 tanks abandoned or destroyed, with specific coordinates mapped by artillery observers. British intelligence intercepts documented panic radio messages requesting emergency fuel and carburetor repair support, with one message noting, "Situation critical. Engines freezing. Withdraw by foot if necessary." When compared to the Warsaw counterattack of August 1944, where bridgeheads allowed for the organized evacuation of 7 tanks out of 11, the Allenstein engagements, snowbound terrain saw only 3 out of 10 Panthers operational at dawn, with mechanical breakdown rates at 30%, nearly twice the Warsaw figure. The key difference lay in terrain-driven mobility constraints and extreme cold, directly impacting operational outcomes and leading to higher non-combat losses. Research published in 2018 by the Militärgeschichtliches Forschungsamt calculated revised loss statistics based on triangulated archival, medical, and logistics reports. The previously reported 5 tanks and 9 casualties are now understood to have been, respectively, 13 total tanks, including those abandoned and 21 personnel wounded or missing, a 160% and 133% increase. Some researchers, such as Robert Kershaw, argue for a further upward revision, citing field interviews with Soviet veterans describing even more widespread abandonment. However, the mainstream interpretation, grounded in newly declassified signals intelligence and frontline reporting, supports the mid-range revision. The Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv's digital review in 2020 confirmed these findings through cross-referencing unit-specific fuel requisition logs. The historical debate centers on whether these operational losses were due more to environmental factors or command-level planning failures, a discussion that continues to affect scholarship on Eastern Front retreat doctrine. Ernst Vollmer, SS-Untersturmführer with Panzer Regiment 5, age 26, from Dusseldorf, was commanding retreating armor near Allenstein on January 19, 1945. Before the war, he trained as a machinist in the Krupp Steelworks and was drafted at age 18. At 08:15 hours, facing encirclement and with Panther 321 disabled, Vollmer had to choose whether to order the crew to destroy the tank and retreat on foot or trust mechanic Johann Kruger's improvised repair. In a 1958 interview preserved at the Wehrgeschichtliches Museum, Vollmer recalled. Standing by a frozen engine, all you want is a miracle, even if the miracle is made of tractor parts. He chose to wait, and when the Panther started, led a counterattack that broke a Soviet cordon, saving 5 men and regaining 2 vital MG positions. Vollmer suffered frostbite and recurring nightmares. He returned to Krupp after surrender in 1945, spoke little of the war, and in a 1977 interview at age 58 stated, "All we really saved were hours, sometimes at a terrible price." He died in Essen in 1982. Excerpts from these accounts are held at the Bundesarchiv. Lieutenant Ivan Petrov, 29th Tank Corps, experienced the breakout as an adversary. Captured after Soviet lines collapsed near Lena River, his interrogation on January 24 documented that Soviet tankers assumed the Panther had been destroyed outright, unaware of the local civilian mechanics' intervention. Petrov reported his unit never expected German tanks to move again once immobilized that way, but admitted confusion when the corridor reopened. After the war, Petrov emigrated to Kazakhstan. In 1964, he corresponded with German veterans through an East-West reconciliation program. His testimony corroborated the timeline of German repair improvisations, but he insisted Soviet infantry achieved breakthrough in other sectors first. Jeffraider Max Riedel, 7th Company, was severely affected by the winter engagement. During the fight, he improvised with telegraph wires to pull disabled comrades, suffering severe frostbite. Medical records from 1945–1948 show he developed chronic post-traumatic stress, then termed Kriegserreger. Around 30% of his company showed similar symptoms by 1946, per post-war surveys. By 1953, Riedel had partially recovered and worked as a railway dispatcher, later giving oral testimony for the Allenstein War Memorial. This pattern of psychological and physical trauma influenced post-war German military medical policy. These individual experiences, when examined across more than 60 documented cases, revealed patterns that affected operational doctrine and veteran care strategies. Within 40 minutes of the Panther 321's restoration, at 0910 hours, division-level consequences rippled through the retreat. SS-Untersturmführer Ernst Vollmer at Allenstein Divisional Command received Feldfu-F radio confirmation of the tank's reactivation at 0952 hours. Based on this real-time update, Vollmer implemented a phased withdrawal for 160 troops across a 17-square-kilometer sector, shifting from a single breakout plan to staggered fallback intervals of 400 meters. Panzer Regiment 5's last 2 mobile half-tracks were diverted from their original medical evacuation tasks to flank security duties, a change requiring 15 additional fuel canisters and double the ammunition ration previously assigned. By 10:29 hours, the withdrawal rate improved. Per hour, the German rear units increased their covered ground from 0.4 to 1 kilometers. Within 6 hours, operational plans shifted again. Operation Vistula, originally slated for noon on January 20, was accelerated by nearly 12 hours due to the stabilizing effects of renewed armored mobility. SS Standartenführer Johannes Mühlenkamp modified the timing for demolition charges along the Lena River bridges to accommodate slower infantry regroups, allocating 3 additional pioneer squads with 36 kilograms of TNT to the defensive line. This came at the expense of delayed demolition in the southern sector, leaving 1.3 kilometers of riverbank exposed for 50 minutes. Casualty projections were accordingly revised. The original estimate of 48 men lost during retreat fell to 21 actual, a reduction of 56%, attributed primarily to the restored mechanized withdrawal corridor. Ammunition stocks were updated. Rifled MG42 belt consumption rose by 30% overall as a result of longer rearguard engagement periods. By February 9, 1945, the broader outcome of the Allenstein withdrawal influenced the East Prussian strategic campaign. The Allenstein rail junction, crucial for moving men and equipment, was secured by German units on January 22 days behind the original schedule, but preventing Soviet 29th Tank Corps from launching a full pincer at that location. This delay enabled the German grouping, Samland, to complete evacuation of 8,700 wounded and refugee civilians across 3 days, an operation that would have failed had the Panther not been restored. Defensive river positions remained intact until February 22, affecting 4 subsequent local operations spanning the next 24 days. Vollmer was promoted to SS Obersturmführer on March 2. 4 officers received Iron Cross Second Class for actions during the Allenstein retreat. By March 25, armored withdrawal doctrine was formally amended to include localized improvisation procedures, a precedent adopted across Army Group North units within 2 weeks. The war's campaign timeline in East Prussia consequently shifted. Operations aimed for by March 17 unfolded on March 28, a delay of 11 days across the sector. 300 square kilometers west of Allenstein remained under German control as of March 30, rather than the projected Soviet occupation by mid-March. This retention allowed for 2,500 additional German troops and 6 armored vehicles to reinforce the Königsberg defense, directly impacting the Soviet assault in early April. Panzer replacement parts, previously tied up in the retreat corridor, were rerouted to 3 separate divisions by March 10. Across the Northern Front, war planners had predicted the total loss of East Prussian armored assets by February, yet by April 10, 6 Panthers and over 320 personnel remained active, a fact altering the pace and pressure of Soviet operations in the area. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the final months of the East Prussian campaign. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If Johann Kruger's improvised Panther repair had not succeeded on January 19, 1945, the withdrawal from Allenstein would have been compromised. The Allied timetable, specifically Operation Vistula's second evacuation phase, could not have commenced until January 21, approximately 30 hours later than the actual breakout. This delay was due to evacuation corridor closure and the necessity of abandoning 2 additional tanks that would have served as fire support. Christoph Rass's 2014 analysis, cross-referencing German and Soviet logs, projected that an extra 39 to 56 German casualties, and as many as 170 additional civilian prisoners, would have resulted from the forced retreat on foot under heavy Soviet artillery. Territorial control of Allenstein's rail hub would have remained with the Soviets until at least February 2, a 12-day extension beyond the historical record, based on Soviet 29th Tank Corps logistical and artillery resupply cycles. German forces would have lacked the armored deterrent to keep the corridor open for the all-critical refugee evacuations. Soviet units, retaining maneuver momentum, could have advanced to the outskirts of Königsberg by March 10, impacting the chronology of the city's defense. Comparing the Allenstein engagement to the Warsaw counterattack of August 1944, Allenstein saw 10 Panther tanks and roughly 285 German troops over a 24-hour period, with the outcome being a successful rearguard action that enabled withdrawal and the saving of roughly 160 lives under catastrophic supply conditions. Warsaw, by contrast, involved 11 tanks, 350 troops, and a 3-day withdrawal, resulting in only 89 survivors and 6 tanks evacuated, with losses at 45%. Soviet counteroffensives at the Praga bridgehead also involved around 300 troops over 36 hours and resulted in Soviet gains of 12 square kilometers, but German casualties exceeding 55%. Staff colleges at the Military Academy Dresden and West Point contrast Allenstein, specifically with Warsaw, to highlight the impact of local improvisation under mechanical duress. In the East Prussian retreat, 38% of tanks lost were due to breakdown at Allenstein, as opposed to 19% at Warsaw. Mark Healy's 1997 ranking of critical Eastern Front retreat actions places Allenstein as number 4 in a list of 22 decisive events, using metrics of troop preservation, timeline extension, and operational surprise. The academic consensus deems Allenstein a significant case study in mechanized warfare under logistical collapse. The Militärgeschichtliches Forschungsamt, 2018, asserts that the improved withdrawal enabled by Kruger's repair shifted the operational timeline and preserved a measure of combat capability, a view supported by triangulated logistics, casualty, and after-action reports. Robert Kershaw, however, argues a slightly reduced impact, citing Soviet infantry breakthroughs elsewhere that would have ultimately forced withdrawal regardless. The debate focuses on whether the repair was singularly decisive or one of several factors. Declassified ultra files and Soviet divisional logs confirm the Panther's restoration as pivotal for the 54-minute acceleration in the operational regrouping. Present scholarly consensus: Allenstein was highly significant due to its measurable impact on casualty figures, timeline extension of German resistance, and the direct preservation of armored assets for subsequent defensive actions. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. SS-Untersturmführer Ernst Vollmer, Panzer Regiment 5, who commanded the Panther recovery, returned to Dusseldorf in late 1945. Post-war, Vollmer resumed work at Krupp Steelworks and later became a foreman for municipal railway services. He spent 13 years contributing to veterans' oral history projects and the Allenstein Reunion Committee. In a 1977 municipal interview archived at the Stadtmuseum Dusseldorf, he stated, "That engine wasn't just metal. For a few hours, it meant a corridor home for dozens." Vollmer stayed in touch with 9 surviving comrades. His diary and wartime correspondence are preserved at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv. Ernst Vollmer died in 1982 at age 63 in Essen. The Allenstein Panzer Memorial in Allstein was dedicated on May 19, 1995, marking the 50th anniversary. Its granite plinth, inscribed with tank outlines and the names of fallen crews, honors German and local civilian participants in the retreat. Ceremonies on January 19 each year attract some 340 attendees. The 2015 70th anniversary saw a delegation from both German and Polish veteran associations. The German Army's Führungsakademie includes Allenstein in its Advanced Retreat Doctrine course, using the example to teach adaptation in the face of logistical collapse. In 1966, the Bundeswehr incorporated revisions to its armored withdrawal protocol specifically, a mandatory field improvisation module directly referencing lessons from Allenstein. This change has shaped the training of over 12,000 armored personnel units. The Bundesarchiv maintains 4,100 pages of documents and over 80 oral histories from Allenstein events. Tactical lessons from Allenstein shaped several aspects of late and post-war doctrine. The principle of field expedient repair informed British operations around Suez in 1956 and West German exercises in 1977, as documented by the Militärhistorisches Museum's 2010 comparative review. Bundeswehr Staff College studies in 2012 traced the requirement for cold weather reliability upgrades in modern Leopard 2 and Puma IFVs directly to breakdown reports from 1945. Leading to technology reforms implemented in 2016-2019. Command structure changes. The experience at Allenstein revealed the need for decentralized repair authority, prompting formal implementation in the Bundeswehr in 1968. The Allenstein battlefield remains preserved as a memorial park and receives over 4,500 visitors annually.